Hello and welcome into the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast Week 3 Recap Edition. I'm your host, Carter Yates. Joining me from beautiful Austin, Texas is senior writer Mike Craven. And Craven, you sent an interesting stat today over. It is that the Texas FBS teams went 10-2 in Week 3, and they're 9-1 against out-of-state programs in that week. 13 FBS programs are combined 26-12 on the season. We're 3 weeks in, about a quarter of the way through the regular season. It's looking pretty good around the state.
We thought it could be a big year. It's shaping up to be a big year. And when looking around the country, it's quarterback play. With the COVID washout year kind of disappearing, around the country, people have gotten a lot younger at quarterback. You've seen it at Ohio State. You've seen it at Oregon. There's just a lot of resets around the nation where you can't just go find the 23-year-old with an extra year of eligibility. Well, Texas, with Sawyer Robertson and Baron Morton and Josh Hoover and Connor Wigman, and Kevin Jennings, on down the line.
And Arch Manning.
Arch Manning's kind of the outlier, and Texas's offense isn't playing that well. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So it just feels like we have a lot of experienced, older quarterbacks in a year where that's a valued commodity again, and that's good for the Lone Star State.
And speaking of high-level quarterback play, start off with Texas A&M. I think the biggest result of Week 3, they defeat number 8 Notre Dame 41-40 on a last-minute touchdown from Marcel Reed to Nate Borkercher. It was a fantastic game, right? The Aggies' first win over an AP top 10 team on the road since 2014 against Auburn. But Craven, you wrote on TexasFootball.com, it's even deeper than that. The last Texas A&M coach to beat a ranked non-conference opponent was Tom Wilson in 1979.
Yeah, and Tom Wilson's tenure is oft forgotten because it's in between Ballard and who am I forgetting now?
It's so forgotten you don't even know who it's sandwiched in between. It was 1979.
Jackie Sherrill. Man, that was like a big brain fart right there. In between Ballard and Jackie Sherrill, so kind of a tenure that's oft forgotten. It's been a long time. That was Penn State in 1979 that they knocked off. These are the type of games for decades now. For most of my viewing life, A&M has lost. They go on the road and then they don't get a good start. Notre Dame blocks a punt, takes it in for a touchdown. A&M throws an early interception. They miss a field goal. A lot was going on the road. Notre Dame's fans are into it. The stadium's rocking, and you have this thought of, well, here it goes. A&M's about to get blown out here. They just weren't ready for this moment. You saw Mike Elko throwing chairs on the sidelines, but they stuck with it. They stood in the game, and they didn't blink, and Notre Dame eventually did by botching that extra point. That gave them the opportunity. It left the door open, and to A&M's credit, they marched right down the field and kicked that door open, got the win, 4th and 11 on the touchdown pass. Just an incredible game and incredible performance.
Someone's got to put that chair Mike Elko slammed up for auction, because that broken, mangled chair, I think, will be the point where Texas 8-4 became a Texas A&M SEC championship contender, potentially. This could be the change of the Mike Elko era. And you mentioned it with the blocked punt and the interception and allowing 7 for 15 third down conversions. There was 13 penalties for 86 yards. And I bring all this up. It sounds mean that I'm bringing this up when they just won, but I'm making a point here of that Texas A&M, the old Texas A&M, kept trying to rear their ugly head a little bit. And Mike Elko made a very good point in the post-game press conference where it was never going to be just a clean break and all of a sudden they were going to come out firing on all cylinders and destroy Notre Dame on the road. You have to defeat your own demons sometimes as a program that go back decades. And they did that on Saturday night. It is a monumental win, I feel like, for this Texas A&M program that I look at them differently now.
Yeah, I think it's a season-defining win for sure. Beyond that, I feel like it's a tenure-defining win. Any Texas A&M fan out there that still had reservations about Mike Elko and wasn't sure if he was the answer and the long-term fit, I think today on September 14th, those are done. I think Mike Elko is the guy. I think he's the perfect type of head coach for A&M. He's exactly what they needed after Jimbo Fisher, but I think he's exactly what they need in general. Has really embraced the culture there. I think he fits with what they need as a head coach. I think the defense is going to get better. The defense wasn't that good, and he's a defensive guy. And when he was the defense coordinator at A&M, they were routinely a really top flight scoring defense. I don't think you love the performances of the first 3 weeks, but if you're a season and 3 games into the Mike Elko tenure, and your concern is, well, the defense just hasn't turned a corner, I guess you just assume it will. And you see what's happening on the offensive side of the ball, and you're like, wow, this, and the recruiting as well, that's only going to pick up after a win like this. A&M's got it rolling on all cylinders, and I think they have the right guy at the helm this time. And that's been the part that's been missing.
Right guy at the helm at head coach, and now the right guy at the helm at quarterback. I mean, Marcel Reed has just the most insane stat line. 17 of 37 for 360 yards, average 21.2 yards per completion. The 2 transfer wide receivers, I was watching the game with my sister who's an A&M grad, and we were both like, what is going on with this A&M offense? I haven't seen receivers like this since Mike Evans, basically. Like Mario Craver, 7 catches for 207 yards, was the most yards since Mike Evans in 2013. Completely unlocked this passing game.
Yeah, after that first touchdown catch, I tweeted, like, A&M didn't have these guys last year. Like they did not have the ability to go make plays on their own. You're not a huge soccer guy, but there's a concept in soccer where, like, some teams have to pass the ball into the net. They don't have the guy who can just, like, make a dude miss and kick, score a goal from 20 yards out. Like, they have to do it perfectly and kind of pass it all the way into the net. That's how A&M was last year. Like, they had to have the 10-play drives and lean on Le'Veon Moss, and everything came so hard because they didn't have any dudes that you could just give the ball and they go make a wonder goal. A&M has those guys now. Mario Craver can make something out of nothing and take a 10-yard pass and make it an 80-yard touchdown. Casey Concepcion can do the same thing. I think Terry Bussey is the type of player who can evolve into that same type of wide receiver. And
that kickoff return by Terry Bussey, man. Oh, it was almost the signature Terry Bussey moment. Then it turns later to a signature Texas A&M moment. But yeah,
the offseason A&M talk was centered on Marcel Reed and the improvements he could make as a quarterback. And he's clearly made some, but the real improvements have been his weapons, and like he doesn't have to be as precise. He has bazookas now, like he can miss a little bit and somebody can go make a play. He completed 46% of his passes, and yet we're singing his praises. And a lot of that's just because of the weaponry he has at his disposal, and it's so much better than it was last year. And that's another reason I think Mike Elko is passing every single test to be the guy at Texas A&M. So far, when he's seen deficiencies, he's gone and attacked them. Wide receiver was a deficiency last year. He didn't panic at quarterback and go highest bid shopping. He goes, we got a guy here we can develop. The big issue is what we have around him. Let's go fix that before we make any like big decisions on who he is as a signal caller. And Mike Elko has been right so far.
Did Notre Dame have Tyler Buckner put on a penny of shame on the sideline so the NBC cameras could find him easier? I mean, what a heartbreak for Buckner, who fumbles the PAT snap, and then that's what ends up being the difference in this game. And the entire time A&M is driving down the sideline, he is standing on the sideline with a yellow highlighter jersey, and they show his face probably 25 times in one drive.
So one of my uncles, he's married in, not a blood uncle, but one of my married in uncles is an Aggie. And he texted me as soon as that point after attempt botch happened and goes, oh shit, we're winning this game. Usually it's us that drops that PAT. Like Notre Dame Aggied. And it was like, this is a new day, right? Like a dawn of a new time. A&M is getting those kind of breaks when typically it's the opponent that kind of gets those breaks from A&M. I wrote during the week that Texas A&M is kind of the Charlie Brown of college football. And then it was Notre Dame that had like pretty much a literal Charlie Brown type moment there on the point after attempt. And so poetically, it felt like A&M had so many opportunities to go away. And I watched like a boxing match right after the football game. And so like apologies if I throw out a bunch of boxing analogies today on this podcast, but it seemed like they had a lot of times to throw in the towel. Like they could have quit. They could have taken a knee. They could have taken the 8 count. They overcame, and a lot of old Aggie teams would have, and they didn't. Like that response drive back to win the football game, I mean, I think you just try to like bottle that because that you're trying to sell that as the new vision of what A&M football can be.
Yeah. I just wonder how many Notre Dame fans were like, wait, that guy's still on the team. Tyler Buckner's still here. Because he was a starting quarterback back in the day and then went to Alabama, and Nick Saban put him in the game against USF, that famous game where they won 17-7. So I just wonder how many Notre Dame fans were like, wait, what? He's still here? I thought he was gone.
Yeah. Are you still, when we watched the UTSA game, and even to an extent the Utah State game, I thought, wow, Colin Klein and the offense is just trying to get Marcel Reed in this passing game going. When it's nut cutting time and they're playing a big time team on the road like Notre Dame, they're going to run the ball 50 times. They're going to throw the ball 20 times. And you look at the stat sheet and it's 37 passes to 32 runs. Some of that's game flow. Notre Dame was scoring pretty quickly. You're not going to just sit there and run the ball and play field position and punt sometime. But it does say something about their confidence in their quarterback in that passing game. And I think any of us that were still doubters after the first 2 weeks that just kind of chalked it up to who they were playing, myself included. I think you watch this Notre Dame game and you go, well, you can't consider this passing game a deficiency anymore. This is a real strength for this football team.
Well, I knew Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion were upgrades. I didn't know they were jackpots like this.
Right.
I would say.
Right.
I think they have a lot of confidence in Marcel Reed, but I would almost say they have even more confidence in Concepcion and Craver. Mm-hmm. That Craver 80-yard touchdown where he basically caught a wheel route and then spun out of two tacklers and didn't even lose speed. It was insane.
Yeah, 139 of his 207 receiving yards were after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
In total, 177 of the 360 passing yards A&M had were after the catch. And I think that's what they did so smartly. Like, they didn't just go get the best wide receivers. They got the best wide receivers for what would work with Marcel Reed. And it just feels like a perfect marriage between him and those wide receivers and what they can go do. And it's been a blast to watch. And you just think the running game will improve each week, right? As Le'Veon gets his sea legs back and gets kind of mentally over the injury. And you just assume, Reuben Owens, like you just think that's going to get going. I'd never thought I'd say this about a Mike Elko football team, but it's the defense. Like how far this thing can go. Going into the season, I thought how far this thing could go depended on Marcel Reed. I think Marcel Reed's proven he can win an SEC championship, especially in this kind of SEC. Like this offense is good enough to compete with any of those teams at the top level. Can the defense? And that's just a question I didn't think I was going to have, 16 games into the Elko era.
Yeah, I think I would give them a slight pass because this is Jeremiah Love and he was a preseason Heisman contender. And I think CJ Carr is a future star, but combined with the first 2 weeks of how shoddy it looked, I do have a concern there. But I think I just kind of trust in Elko that it's going to get fixed as well.
Yeah, I think I do too. I just don't. I guess the Dave Aranda thing has kind of jaded me on that idea.
Or the Steve Sarkisian thing.
Right, or the Steve Sarkisian. I do think sometimes me mostly, just kind of, okay, well, the coach is going to figure that part out. If the opposite side of the ball is excelling, then eventually it's going to open up. But I'm not sure the defense at A&M is going to be stellar this year. Like it might be a need another year or two in recruiting. They lost a lot of talent up front. This just may be what they have. And we'll see what Bryce Anderson suffered, what looked like a really tough injury there against Notre Dame. The good news for A&M to spin it forward is at least over the next month, they're not playing any high-level explosive offenses. You get the bye week, and then it's Auburn, and Auburn could run the football, but they're not up and down on you, right? With kind of limited quarterback play. Mississippi State, Florida, at Arkansas, and so and LSU might not be considered that explosive of an offense. Those are the next 5 games. If they can go 4-1 in that span and sit at 7-1 going into their next bye week, I think this last year's felt like a mirage. If they can do it this year, it feels like it has a little bit more staying power.
Mm-hmm. I love the all-white uniforms. They were fantastic, but a nitpick is Le'Veon Moss wearing blue gloves and blue shoes and a blue mouth guard. I do not understand that.
I did like the script helmet.
Yes.
Big fan of that. And I'm just a sucker for the all white jerseys. The Stormtrooper look does it for me.
Mm-hmm. So Texas A&M is now the new number 1 in your power poll, Craven, that just dropped today on TexasFootball.com and on all the social medias. They passed up the Texas Longhorns, who A&M's win could be program defining, inspiring. The Longhorns was anything but that. A 27-10 win over UTEP. And the storyline for me is Arch Manning. At one point in the game, he was 0 for 9 with an interception. And that stat line, in reality, it looked so much worse than the stat line is. Because he missed multiple wide open touchdowns. He is booed by Texas fans. Craven, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, Malachi Nelson against the Texas defense had a better quarterback rating than Arch Manning had against the UTEP defense.
And by the way, Malachi Nelson wasn't good. And that's because he was facing the Texas defense with a UTEP offense.
Right. Yeah. 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he had 209 yards, which is almost 100 yards more than Arch Manning had. I've gotten to the point where it almost feel better to know he was injured. Like, that's how bad he's playing. You want an excuse for it.
I was watching the game and thinking about, I feel like this is heading towards us getting a big written feature story in January or February. And like, this is how injured Arch Manning was. Yeah.
Chris Lowe is going to have the exclusive on that, by the way. He's got all those Jimmy Sexton guys in his pocket. He's got that relationship going. After the Ohio State game, it felt pretty obvious that in the big games, in those big moments against Ohio State, probably against Oklahoma, maybe even at Florida, for sure against Georgia, the recipe for this Texas team was going to be good special teams play, good defense, try to win 24-17, kind of old school SEC. Like, that's how they're going to have to do it. This offense isn't explosive enough. Arch Manning still has a ways to go. With each passing week, like, it's not just that this offense is average, like, they're bad. Like, it's a detriment. Like, it's working against Texas. And it just, you thought it'd get better. He was supposed to have 3 weeks where he could get some rhythm. They could out-athlete everybody. Guys would be running open. So you got San Jose State, you got UTEP, you have Sam Houston to figure it out. Well, 2 of those 3 are gone, and it feels like he's getting worse. Like, it's backsliding.
Exactly the thought I had, because I remember talking after the Ohio State game and saying, I don't care what he looks like for the next 3 games, because I assumed he was going to throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in each game. I did not know it was going to get worse. Now I really do care. And I don't know if he's physically injured. I feel like he is mentally not himself right now watching the game. That performance yesterday was the worst game I've seen by a quarterback in a Texas jersey. I legit felt bad for Manning watching that game, because it felt like I was watching a young man crumble under the weight of all the expectations placed in front of him. He basically spent 2 years watching everyone dump on Quinn Ewers for being above average, because they believed Manning was going to be the Heisman front runner, and they all thought he was going to be better than Quinn Ewers. And it just feels like every game, every throw, he is trying to live up to his grandfather and his 2 uncles. And he's pressing so hard that he just needs to play within himself, and he's trying to do far too much. And I know you can say that, like, hey, he makes $6 million. Why do you feel bad for him? Like, do you not think he would give up every last penny to be having a better season than what he's having right now?
Well, that's because he's rich, Carter.
I know, but he's also losing so much more earning potential later.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, Arch isn't, he's not poor, so it's easier for him to make that decision probably. What I find interesting is what Steve Sarkisian's seen behind closed doors, like in meetings with him. What's he like mentally right now? Like, where is Arch Manning at? Like, is this a blip in the radar and you feel good about his demeanor and where he's going moving forward, and he's the type of guy that's going to fight this off and be better? Or is this kind of getting to him a little bit to where it's just kind of in quicksand, getting worse and worse and worse as he's sinking more and more? I also wonder what they saw in practice the last couple of years. Like, if they've seen these ups and downs, and they've seen these inconsistencies, and they've seen some of these poor mechanics and just kind of the way he gets through progressions in his feet? And if so, why was this the plan? I think you could have had Quinn Ewers back if you really wanted it, right? Like if that was something Steve Sarkisian. So it leads me to believe that if Steve Sarkisian watched Arch Manning for 2 years, that he's performing better in practice than we're seeing him.
Well, we saw it in the 2 games last year when he played. I know it was Mississippi State and ULM. He looked so much better than this. And I know, again, Mississippi State, ULM, it was UTEP, guys.
Right.
All due respect.
That's true. So why you think it's mostly mental?
I think it's mental.
Yeah, if it's not a physical thing, if he's really not injured, and Steve Sarkisian, it's hard to believe what Steve Sarkisian's saying, like when he just completely poo-poos the injury thing, because we had the Xavier Worthy where he had a broken hand for 2 months, but nobody ever said anything. And then they randomly said something type of deal a couple of years ago. And so you don't really know what's above board and what's not. If your quarterback's kind of injured, but not injured enough to sit out, maybe you don't want to say he's banged up so opponents don't know and can kind of pick on a shoulder or something like that. But I'm going to take him for his word. I'm going to take Arch and Sark at their word and say he's not injured, that he's fine physically. And that only leaves that it's a mental issue. And at that, how do you fix that? How do you fix that in the middle of the season? You would think you fix it with San Jose State and UTEP and Sam Houston, but it doesn't seem to be true.
If he was physically injured, he would have sat out a game or two in this stretch of San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston. I one time in my distinguished athletic career had the yips as a catcher where I physically could not throw the ball back to the pitcher. And I almost see that in Arch Manning right now where he's not completing 5-yard hitch routes. People are saying, hey, he can't throw for 100 yards in the game barely right now. He can barely throw a 5-yard hitch route. And I'm not trying to dump on the guy, Craven. I genuinely feel bad because this is the most hyped debut of a quarterback ever. And I get Arch Manning didn't ask for this, but he also had inherent advantages that gave people this impression that he was going to hit the ground running, and he's 6'4", 215, and he's been to the Manning Passing Academy every year, and his uncles are Super Bowl champion quarterbacks, and everyone piled this kid on with expectations, and it looks like he's crumbling.
Yeah, I mean, myself included.
Me too.
Arch Manning's, first team All-Texas in the magazine. I guess I just assumed, wrongly, obviously, that if Steve Sarkisian was okay with an NFL quarterback walking out the door, that he too felt really confident in what Arch Manning could give this offense and give this football team. I thought that they could win a national championship with that defense, with a quarterback that can push the ball down the field. But instead, that it's just not that. Right now, the Longhorns are playing football games with one hand tied behind their back, and they're going to have to win really ugly. And they may be able to do that 9 or 10 times during the regular season. But the ceiling is not national championship anymore. The ceiling is maybe make the playoff, maybe play for an SEC championship game, depending on how it goes. But I think this is maybe one of the 9 to 14 best teams in the country, not one of the top 5 best teams in the country anymore.
And I know people will talk about, well, the offensive line is a little leaky in the running game, with C.J. Baxter not being out. And then the wide receivers, are they as dynamic as they were last year? Dude, I think this is all the quarterback right now. Honestly, he has hamstrung this offense by his performance, and Steve Sarkisian is using 10% of the playbook right now.
I think it's hard those other things may also be true. Maybe the offensive line isn't good enough. Maybe the wide receivers aren't talented enough yet. Maybe they're too young. Maybe the running game's not where it should be. But how do you even judge that until the quarterback play is adequate? You just can't even tell. Same with the play calling. You get on social media and you see the gripes about Sark's play calling. Well, what do you call when your quarterback can't hit an open Parker Livingston in the flat to get a first down? What do you?
Or Ryan Wingo on a wheel route. They said the stat about Ryan Wingo had 3 catches all season, and my jaw hit the floor. I said, "What?"
Yeah. He's just not in sync with these guys, and he should be. And that's an issue. And it felt like after Ohio State, it was as simple as, well, go build some confidence against these next 3 teams and be ready for SEC play. I just think this is what it is this year. It might get marginally better, but it's not going to turn into some type of passing attack that leads Texas to the heights it thought it was. It's going to have to be down and dirty, 21-17, just some gross old school SEC football. Like, that's how Texas is going to have to do this thing.
I will still stay with my point I had originally at the Ohio State game. Like, maybe this is all actually a good thing in the long run, because there was so much expectation placed on Arch Manning, and I feel like you always play wondering what would happen if the bottom dropped out. And now the bottom's dropped out, dude. Like, this has been the worst case scenario. It can't get worse than this. And guess what? You guys are 2-1 with everything to play for, and you realize that even when you've played like this, you have the ball and are able to go drive to potentially win the game against Ohio State, the number 1 team in the country.
What I love about college football, it's why it's my favorite sport, is that for like 7 or 8 months, very smart people, I include myself in like the kind of smart category. You know, you come up with all these takes and you do all this research and you think about this stuff so much and you come up with these ideas. And, you know, I think going into the season, it felt like Texas had, 4 really big games away from DKR at Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Florida. And Texas was going to have the quarterback advantage in 3 of those 4 games over Julian Sayin, over John Mateer, over Gunnar Stockton. And the one where you're like, man, Texas probably not going to have the quarterback advantage, probably in the swamp against DJ Lagway. We're 3 weeks into 2025, and Ohio State clearly had the quarterback advantage. I'd imagine Oklahoma will keep their quarterback over Arch Manning. I'd imagine Georgia would keep their quarterback over Arch Manning. And as DJ Lagway, that may be the quarterback that Texas has the real advantage over because he's playing so poorly. Marcel Reed playing better at quarterback than Arch Manning is, for sure. And so I think going into the season, I thought they'd win at least 10 games because they'd have the quarterback advantage and they have an elite defense. They still have an elite defense. I just don't think they have the quarterback advantage anymore. And those other parts around him that you mentioned as maybe being deficiencies or not, I don't think, no matter what, I don't think they're good enough to elevate it. Like the running game is not good enough to win despite no passing game. The wide receivers aren't good enough to go make plays even without a consistent quarterback. Like Arch needed to be good to elevate those other spots, and he's not. And that's, I guess, showing some glaring weaknesses or some deficiencies in those areas. I just don't think Texas can overcome. I don't know. How do you fix this in the middle of the season? It seems so broken that this is an off season going into 2026 issue. And you just got to see how long you can ride it without a functioning offense in 2025.
I think the fix is honestly like going to see a sports psychologist and with the team, honestly. I'm not even trying to be funny, because Red River rivalry, that Cotton Bowl right now would eat him up if he doesn't get the mentals right.
Right. At Georgia. I mean, there's some real spots here where if it is a mental deal, it can get exposed quickly. I think Texas is in trouble. And if I could bet the over under on the win total 9.5 going into the season again, I'd take the under. This doesn't feel like a double digit team win. It doesn't feel like a college football playoff team, which is why I'm shocked that they're still 8th in the AP poll.
Someone's got to make the call to cancel those Warby Parker commercials about Arch not being able to see as he's missing wide open guys on like Ryan Wingo.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird, man.
It's one of the weirdest developments, I think, of the season so far.
I've thought about doing what we got right, what we got wrong. I'll probably wait until after week 4, because then it could be like, a third of the way through the season. And week 4 is kind of loaded. I think week 4 is going to be a show us what you are type of weeks for a lot of the teams in the state. But one of the things we clearly got wrong was Arch Manning. Like clearly got wrong. Mm-hmm. At least at the moment.
I'm hoping for him, as the guy who covers the state of Texas, that he, realizes to just start playing within himself, because I know he's talented. And that's what's frustrating for this. If you're a Texas fan, is you've sat here for 3 years and heard OU and Georgia fans talk about how this kid's name was Joe Smith. He'd be a 3-star, and his private school, high school competition was a bunch of Future Sigma news. And you brushed them off as haters, and instead now they seem like they're right.
Yeah.
So, you thought Malachi Nelson versus Arch Manning was the most overrated quarterback battle. Get ready for DJ Lagway, Arch Manning.
Yeah. Be Jets versus Jaguars in a few years.
So Texas offense looked lackluster, but the Texas Tech offense is rolling. They throttle Oregon State 45-14. The Red Raiders were up 45-0 at one point and outgained Oregon State 513-282 in total yards. So, Craven, why is Texas Tech not above Texas right now in your power poll?
Well, it's a great question. I can understand those who say Texas Tech has been dominant against everybody that they've played. You can only play who's on your schedule. Texas looked bad against UTEP, as we just spent 10, 15 minutes talking about. So I'm not here to poo-poo against that. Like, I think that's a fine argument. I just don't know what the Red Raiders are. Like, they've played Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and now Oregon State at home. And this, we'll talk about the Washington State, North Texas game here in a little bit. These helmets have more prestige than talent, right? Like, Oregon State and Washington State are not your older brothers, Oregon State and Washington State. Like, not like getting left out of the musical chairs has really hurt them. Their roster is depleted because they're on islands. They're not competing for anything. They're not in conferences really. And so they're just not very good football teams. I think Texas losing by 7 on the road in front of 107,000 people against Ohio State, who may be, again, the best team in the nation, is more impressive than anything I've seen Tech do. Tech goes on the road next week plays against Utah, and they win that football game. Like, they're going to be 2 and Texas is going to be 3. You know, so it'll fix itself if Tech really is what we've seen in the first 3 weeks. I know Texas's defense is elite. I'm still waiting to see if any part of Tech is, and we'll start to get a clearer picture of that over this next month. But I don't think anything they've done the first 3 weeks tells us much of any story other than they are much better than Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State.
So let's say Texas Tech beats Utah by 2 touchdowns and Texas arch looks fixed for Sam Houston. And they beat Sam Houston, who that's not a good defense, like 35-3. What happened? There's a lot of other stuff that would have to be taken into account, but like
I'm moving Tech up.
Okay.
I'm moving Tech up. I'm a big believer of like, what's your best win? Especially this early in the season, because you like, what are the other data points? And blowing out teams requires a good offense, and Texas offense is clearly better than Texas's. If the FBS Power Poll was like rank the offenses in the state, like Tech would be maybe number 1. But Texas isn't going to blow anybody out. That defense is just really, really good. You know, I think people came at me today like I was in the minority. Like, they're 8th in the AP poll and Tech is 17. You know, like Texas stayed in front of A&M, even though A&M just beat Notre Dame. And so I think Texas is still deserving to be the second best team in the state. But Texas Tech can go change that with a big-time data point, and that would be winning on the road against Utah, because then that would become the best performance, the best result so far of the season. I know this sounds dumb, but I think between the two teams right now, the best result of the season is having the ball with a chance to tie the game at midfield with 2 minutes left in the horseshoe.
Statement loss.
With a shitty with like bad quarterback play, you're still in that game to go tie it against a team that may go win the national championship again. Like, Texas isn't what we thought they were going to be. And I just said in the last segment, I don't think that they're a national championship contender as they look right now. But they're still talented enough, and they still have an elite unit on one side of the ball to be a top 15 team in the country. I don't know that about Tech yet. I might this time next week, but right now I just don't know that. I think the first 3 weeks are more about who they've played than who they are, at least on paper, like right now. Like, maybe we look back on it and we're like, oh, well, we should have seen it from the very beginning. Like, Tech went 12-0, like they dominate. But as of right now, I don't know, man, those teams just aren't any good.
You know what, brother? I'm going to stand with you on this when the Texas Tech fans get onto us out here. And this actually might hurt you because I'm a Texas grad, so this might just get them more angry.
But here's the thing, though, about, like, can you imagine accusing Dave Campbell's and, like, honestly, me of being anti-Texas Tech?
No.
I mean, come on, what are we doing? Sometimes things are just opinions. And, like, my opinion doesn't have to be the same as yours, but that doesn't mean it comes from a place of, like, hate and biasy. You know, like, sometimes it's just an opinion. Like, I think Texas is I just think Texas is still worthy of being number 2 in the FBS poll. If you did a poll and you had Tech at 2 and Texas at 3, I wouldn't argue too much. Like, I totally get it. I'm not going to overreact until I see a result from Tech that raises the eyebrows. And they've beaten an FCS team, the worst team in FBS, and a really bad Oregon State team. Like, we'll see.
Show it to us versus Utah.
Right. We'll see it. We'll see it in 6 days if they should have been second or not. And if they win that football game, they will be. So I don't know. It's week 3. Well, although I guess we shouldn't like push back against engagement. Like, yell at me all you want to. We need as much engagement.
That is true. Yes. I don't mean to say that, like, hey, Red Raider fans, like, stop coming at us. Please come at us harder.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Just be nice. Be kind, I guess.
Houston rolls Colorado 36-20. Speaking of a statement win that Texas Tech has the opportunity to make this upcoming week, the Cougars are 3-0 for the first time since 2016. 431 yards of offense was the first time in 21 games that Houston has had more than 400 yards. Wow. Willie Fritz, you're doing it again.
Yeah, Fritz magic. I mean, he's Novocaine. I mean, we've talked about this since he got to be the coach there. Like, we said, don't pay attention to 2024, wake us up in 2025, and we'll see how this thing's rolling. And it seems to be rolling well. Like we just talked about against Tech, I don't want to give Houston their flowers too soon here. I mean, we had them going 3-0 to start the season because of that schedule, so they haven't done anything unexpected. They've played SFA, they played Rice, and they've played against the third-string Colorado quarterback at home. I don't think any of those teams are making bowl games. I don't think SFA is making the FCS playoffs, and so they've done what they should do. They get a bye week this week, and then they go play this bad Oregon State team that Texas Tech just played. So they should be 4-0 going into that game against Texas Tech. And then we'll learn a lot about what the Cougars are in that one. But they're competent, and they're playing to the strengths of their team. And they have a solid roster and an improved roster in year 2 versus year 1. They lost some guys to injury. It was kind of a mash unit along the offensive line by the end of that game. So that's concerning. But the idle week comes right at the right time. Obviously, we really enjoy what Willie Fritz does and think that program is heading in the right direction. Not sure I'm ready to be like Big 12 contending Rice or Big 12 contending Houston in 2025. But the way they're recruiting and the way they're winning games that they should, like, this is what you're supposed to do.
A big reason for this excitement is Connor Wegman, 222 passing yards, 83 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns, and then just drops an absolute baller after the game. I promised I never flinched. I stared adversity in the eyes and went to work every day, all summer. Craven, is Connor Wegman back, or was this a one-off like Missouri last year?
I think Connor Wegman is back. I think quarterbacks in this new world, I think sometimes just find their level. And I think Connor Wegman has found his level. Like, I think being the quarterback of a Big 12 team like Houston is exactly where he probably needed to be the whole time. He was probably a little overrated coming out of high school in terms of like big time recruit prospect. That whole group was really COVID year kind of made quarterback stuff kind of weird. But he's perfect for what they're asking him to do. They're not asking him to throw the ball 50 times a game and just kind of pass them to success. Houston ran the ball 53 times and passed the ball 24. You know, like, he gets to complete 60+% of his passes, take some shots downfield to Steven Johnson, get them above the chains, have a lot of man coverage because you're playing 7-8 men in the box and you can use the play action. Like, that's Slade-Nagel. Like, that's what they did with Michael Pratt at Tulane to make him look like a really good quarterback. So we were really wrong about Arch Manning. I think we were perfectly right about what this Houston offense would be and what this Houston program would be. They have raised the floor. The floor will never be 4-8 again with Willie Fritz there. Like, they are going to be aggressively competent with Fritz. Now it's the ceiling. Can they beat the Techs? Can they beat the TCUs? Can they beat the Baylors? I'm not sure they can this year, but if I'm a Houston fan, I am enjoying the trajectory and feel like in a couple of years we can be in the Big 12 championship kind of mixes, and that's why they hired Willie Fritz.
We need to put that on a shirt. Willie Fritz, aggressively competent.
That goes a long ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we started this podcast with an A&M Notre Dame game that was lost because they couldn't hold a snap on a PAT. Like, it's college football. It's 18 to 22-year-olds. There's a lot of jackassery that goes on in this sport. Not being the one that makes mistakes a lot of times leaves you standing at the end of the fight. And that's what Fritz does. Like, that's been his whole calling card. That's how they beat TCU last year and Kansas State last year. Like, even when they weren't good enough to be in those games, they just don't shoot themselves in the foot. I know that sounds cliche, but that goes a long way in this sport. It's not the NFL where everybody's like uber talented and you just, like a lot of times it just comes down to who's worse, not who's better. And Houston with Willie Fritz is never going to be the team that has 150 penalty yards and turns the ball over 4 times and doesn't make tackles and has special teams blunders. They're 5 of 6 in the kicking game. Like they're just aggressively competent.
Yeah, Willie Fritz has seen a lot of football in his career, but he has never seen a 50-yard field goal. And Ethan Sanchez became the first to do that.
That's pretty crazy. That's a crazy stat.
Also, a statement win for Houston because they had the largest attendance in the Willie Fritz era. So, in front of a lot of people, showing this new era of Houston.
When you get a chance in a big city, you have to capitalize. Houston did it on Friday night. North Texas did it on Saturday. Like those were big opportunities for those programs, and they both won them. And that's big. That is big. It's more than just a W. Like that victory matters more than it will just look like in the record book for both of those programs.
Let's talk about the Mean Green. I love it. They destroy Washington State 59-10. It's the largest margin of victory over FBS competition since 2011. And Craven, you wrote on TexasFootball.com after the game that this was the moment Eric Morris's program arrived because North Texas fired Seth Luttrell, the former coach, when they were in the conference championship game because they didn't finish above 500 in 4 straight seasons. They thought they had another level, and thus far, under Eric Morris, they haven't. And it was because the defense was porous, putting it nicely. Well, now they got Skylar Cassidy at DC. Eric Morris's offense is Eric Morris's offense. And I know it's not your grandpa's and your father's Washington State, but like 59-10 is pretty awesome over a Pac-12 team.
We wondered aloud a lot what North Texas under Eric Morris could look like with competent defensive play. Well, it turns out pretty awesome. North Texas scored 28 points off of 5 turnovers. Like the defense is helping.
Eric Morris is the best complimentary football he's ever seen.
They're not even just competent. Like they're good. Like they went from a negative, blew past just like the average, mean, and have gone into positive. Like the North Texas defense is a reason in which the Mean Green are an American Athletic Conference contender, American Conference contender now. That you could, if you would have said this time last year, you got slapped in the face. Like there was no belief in that was going to happen. I think a lot of college coaching, a lot of just looking at college football is about floors and ceilings. North Texas wasn't happy with their ceiling. They were fine with the floor. I think Seth Luttrell had eliminated the 2-10, 3-9, just those really, really bad seasons. I think they had become a pretty solid average program. They played for a conference championship, as you mentioned, the year he got fired. But as we talk about a lot, college football is as fun as it is miserable for your rival and vice versa. And North Texas's rival is UTSA. And while North Texas was hovering at 500 and failing to kind of get over the hump, despite having advantages in resources and recruiting in the Metroplex, et cetera, UTSA was thriving. They were winning multiple conference championships. They hit the ground running in the American. Jeff Traylor has that thing turned around. And North Texas looked at it and said, like, why not us? Like, why can't we go do that? We don't have to accept just being 500 because we haven't been a great program before. Like, the tides are turning. Like, let's go take advantage of this. And kudos to them. I was a non-believer,
we'll get to your power poll. You still might be a non-believer.
But Morris has clearly raised the ceiling by getting competent on the defensive side of the ball because he's always going to score points. That offense is always going to be very good. Now the defense is good to very good. I think that they're a real contender. Like the Army game, September 20th, kind of like with Texas Tech. Like we think we know, but we're about to find out in 6 days, like what this team really is. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. So why did North Texas not move up from number 9 your power poll? Because I believe Texas State did not move and they're number 8. And
I kept them the same. I kept them 8 and 9. I think the P4 teams are a step above right now. And so I haven't flirted with kind of the top 7 have been P4. The bottom 6 have been G5. I think that'll change as we get into conference play. I think Texas State has the better win. Going to the Alamo Dome and beating a UTSA team that is 29-3 in that building since 2020. The only two teams that have won are Army with a funky offense and Houston, which is a Power 4 team when they had Clayton Tune. I think that's a bigger win than blowing out Washington State at home. Washington State beat Idaho 13-10. This isn't a good football team. It was a great performance by North Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Washington State's not a good football team. You go and you beat Army on the road. Now you probably have the best win. And just like Texas Tech will jump Texas if the Red Raiders beat Utah on the road and now they have the biggest feather in their cap, I think North Texas, it will happen the same. If Texas State beats Nichols and North Texas goes on the road and beats a solid Army team, I think North Texas probably jumps Texas State in the power poll. So I don't want to get too far ahead. I guess I try to keep it less predictive and more about like what's happened so far and what I can put on paper. And I get why fans don't look at it that way. And like some would do it a different way where it becomes predictive of like, who do I think would win today? And I think on a neutral site, that's a tough one. Who would you take on a neutral site right now if North Texas, Texas State were playing?
Texas State still.
I think I would too, honestly. Not by much, but I think I would as
well. It would be a hell of a game. I'd love to see it. If we could run that thing back at the First Responders Bowl, like sign me up.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be a really, really good football game. But yeah, I think it's a coin flip. I think I could hear arguments for either team. And if both teams have an argument, I feel like they're pretty equal, then I'm going to go with the biggest win. And right now, the biggest win is Texas State's on the road against UTSA. And I'm not going to knock them for losing to the defending Big 12 champion on the road by 19 when they're a 17.5-point underdog. Like that was what was supposed to happen.
Yeah, especially when Arizona State was pissed off about the Mississippi State game.
Yeah. So I don't bang them too much for that. Not a great performance by the Bobcats, but I'm not going to sit here and throw them under the fire and forget what happened last week because they beat a team that was in the college that had Texas 4th and 13 away from, going to the quarterfinal or the semifinals in the college football playoff last year. Like that's a good program. Texas State's supposed to lose by double digits on the road to Arizona State. They did. And so I just kind of kept it the same until we have some more data points, and week 4 is going to give us a lot more data points. SMU TCU as well is another one that's kind of up in the air.
Week 4 is judgment week for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to find out a lot about these programs. Okay, let's talk about the Bobcats. So Arizona State took out some anger on Texas State in a 34-15 win. At one point in this game was 27-3. So it probably was not even that close as 34-15, we'll say. And I think this is a case of, look, sometimes you got to tip your cap. I mean, G.J. Kinney said after the game that Sam Leavitt, the Arizona State quarterback, was doing some things that he's never seen on a football field. Like Sam Leavitt, that spin out, they hit a couple quarterback runs that were crazy. The spin out
was nasty.
And then he at one point was rolling left, jumped in the air like a spider monkey, threw it to Jordan Tyson, who then hurdled him into the end zone. Like, that was disgusting. Yeah. So sometimes, like, hey, congrats.
Yeah, and the biggest difference in these programs a lot of times is the line of scrimmage and run game. Arizona State averaged 5.8 yards a rush. Texas State was at 2.8. Like it was hard to protect Brad Jackson. I think for the first time, he looked like a freshman, looked confused. It looked like it was going really fast for him, which makes perfect sense. Arizona State has athletes that he hadn't seen so far, and so the game was sped up. But I think Texas State is fine. Coming off of and coaches can't talk like this, but I think we can. Hey, you come off a big win against your rival on the road and kind of, put a statement in the ground, put a flag in the ground like that. You're probably always going to have a little bit of a letdown, a little bit of an emotional and physical letdown because so much goes into that football game. And as you mentioned, Arizona State's on the inverse of that because they just got upset on the road against Mississippi State and need to get right before Big 12. So it kind of felt like a perfect storm for Arizona State to have it's a 9:30 kickoff Central Time for Texas State. A perfect storm to have kind of a setback, letdown week. But we'll see. We won't know much more when they play Nichols. But as Sun Belt play gets there, we'll kind of see what Texas State is more than what we saw, I think, against Arizona State.
So that'd be a dumb thought, but I feel like Brad Jackson and Sam Leavitt are kind of the same quarterback. Like Brad Jackson's obviously just younger and less experienced, but I feel like they have like the similar play style. So if he can be like a G5 version of Sam Levitt, like sign me up.
I don't know how many Sun Belt teams can do it, but I do feel like we saw the recipe to slow down this Texas State offense, and that's play really good against the run and then play too deep shell. Don't let them get big plays in the passing game. Now, UTSA didn't have the personnel to do it. So like maybe that was their game plan and they still couldn't figure it out. But Brad Jackson's like had 24 yards per completion against UTSA, and it was 7.4 against Arizona State. So if I'm a Bobcat fan, I think that is my worry coming out of this game is if we can't get big plays, can we score? Maybe that won't matter against the Sun Belt. Maybe you just can get big plays. But in those type of games, maybe against a James Madison or a Louisiana or Troy, like some of those tight games where you kind of need to grind it out, will this offense be able to do that? That's to be seen.
Yeah, they definitely limited big play Brad and big play Bo for sure. Are you concerned also about the rush defense? Because the last two games, ASU has had 245 yards on 5.8 per carry, and UTSA had 245 on 7.2 per carry.
I don't think it's the strength of Texas State, and they're going to have to kind of outscore some teams in a way, but I also think the offensive lines and run games for UTSA and Arizona State are better than anything they're going to see in the Sun Belt, minus maybe one or two games. And so I think it'll be a little. I don't think that it's going to be the strength of this defense, but I think it'll look better against Sun Belt competition than maybe it has the last 2 weeks. Like UTSA can really run the football. Like Robert Henry is leading the country and rushing. Arizona State's going to run the ball. So I think it was more about the opponents than Texas State, but we'll collect more data points and kind of see if it rears its head.
All right, so those were all the pretty big games, seismic results, I think, throughout the state. Let's run through the last few games, not as seismic, but still some stuff to talk about. Like this Ephus touchdown that Samford threw on Baylor. So Baylor won the game 42-7. They honestly might have lost, though, because that play was if you guys didn't see it, it is the slowest, highest, loftiest touchdown pass by a running back on a double pass I've ever seen.
It looked like a glitch on a video game.
Yeah.
Where you accidentally push too many buttons and the ball just kind of spurts out or whatever. It is like one of those where you clip and you're like, look at this. Didn't learn much from that Baylor game, obviously, but I think this is a crazy stat. Sawyer Robertson already over 1,000 yards passing on the season.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that great of a game for him for Samford, honestly. Like he was depressing a little bit.
Yeah, just absolutely wild how good of a start he's had. He threw his first interception, so got that out of the way. They did what they're supposed to do against Samford. I think Dave Aranda talked about it. It was hard to get the guys motivated after a big game against SMU, and then you got Arizona State the next week. That's a sandwich game against a bad team, but you won 42-7 and got out of there, and that's probably all that matters.
Here was one interesting thing, though, out of this game. Dave Aranda asked if he can see his defense taking baby steps since the second half of the SMU game, and he answered, I don't know.
Yeah, which is true. You just probably shouldn't say it.
Well, yeah. To be fair, how much can you tell versus Samford? Like, right. I don't know.
Right.
Okay. TCU takes care of Abilene Christian 42-21. The only interesting stat I think from this game is Abilene Christian converted 12 of 17 third downs. So not great for TCU.
Not great for TCU. A weird start to the season, obviously. You had the Bill Belichick deal and the Monday night, and then you have the early week 2 idle week, and then you're playing against an FCS opponent right before a big rivalry game. So don't want to read too much into it. They built a big lead early, and then ACU kind of scored and hung around there. But I think the Horned Frogs are good. I think they're a Big 12 contender. Love Josh Hoover. SMU is the real measuring stick. Because I think that week 1 win against North Carolina, you think that was more about TCU being great or North Carolina being bad?
North Carolina being bad.
I do too. And so that doesn't mean TCU can't be really good, that TCU can't be great, and that performance can't be an indicator of what's to come. I'm just not sure it is. I do know that North Carolina is crap. I'm just not convinced that TCU is great. But if they go and they beat SMU, then that's another data point in that direction. So a big one in the iron skillet, the last one scheduled. So it's going to be a big game. I'm not surprised TCU was sloppy heading into it, just like SMU was sloppy heading into it. Yeah,
I mean, keeping with the theme of ugly wins over inferior opponents, SMU limps to a 28-10 win over Missouri State. Missouri State was up 10-0 late in the first half. SMU had 2 turnovers and a missed field goal in the first 3 drives.
So panic time on the hilltop. How are you feeling about about the Mustangs right now.
No, I'm not panicking because I remember how discombobulated they looked last year in the first three games.
I do think that's the saving grace here. Like if you're on the side of let's not panic this early, you point to last year and you go after 3 games a year ago, they were 2-1, had lost to a Big 12 team at home. And didn't look great, barely beat Nevada in that week 0 weird game on the road. And so this is when they turned it on. That TCU game last year is really what propelled the Ponies. I just don't know if they have, they had some things they could do differently last year. They could bring in Kevin Jennings. Like they could change it up. I don't know if they have a number 2 pitch this year. Like this is who they are. They're young at wide receiver. It's that defense that really bothers me. But in 2 of the 3 games, they've been sloppy. And they had a 14-point lead at the end against Baylor and blew that, and then they lost in overtime. So they just don't look as sharp and as focused and like out to prove the doubters wrong. I just wonder if that chip on their shoulder that propelled them so much last year isn't there. And like in a lot of these games that are pretty even talent-wise, if that's the catalyst and that's no longer there, like how do you go and replicate that? Where do you go find that from?
Yeah, that's a good point. But also, I mean, like playing at Missouri State, tough environment,
I would imagine that's the last time SMU plays a game like that. That was scheduled in a time where SMU was not what SMU is now. I would think that no longer happens.
Yeah, I'm not pressing the panic button yet. Iron Skillet, if they have a TCU performance like last year, and by TCU performance, I mean they're on the losing end of it, like TCU was last year, then I'm okay. Yeah, let's press the panic button.
Yeah. Although that schedule doesn't look as tough anymore. You don't play Florida State. Clemson doesn't look like an impossible game. I don't think Louisville's looked as good as we thought maybe they'd be. Miami's going to be a tough one on the road, but they don't have to be great to still be good in that conference.
Yeah, so except this is where I start buying in on Clemson again, though. Like the stock's at an all-time low. They always feel like they pull out a 10-win season. Look, I mean, we know Haynes King. It's tough to beat Haynes King when he's, going wild like that.
That's true. Shout out the King family.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's wrap it up with the last few games here. Rice, they beat Prairie View A&M 38-17. This sets up a golden opportunity to start 3-1 next week against Charlotte.
Yeah, running attack looked as good as it has so far this season. It's fun when it gets rolling. But yeah, we'll learn a lot against the Owls, or a lot about the Owls this week against Charlotte. It's just I just find these type of games are so hard. Like we've had like half of the games this week are against inferior FCS opponents. Like what do you draw from that? I think it's good for Rice that they went and did what they were supposed to do. But holler at me after the Charlotte game, and we'll have more Owl thoughts.
This is a diatribe that could just derail the podcast, but why do they play so many FBS versus FCS games? I
think it's because they don't have a preseason, and you have to try to get to bowl eligibility, right? Like you have to get to 6 wins somewhere. It also keeps those FCS teams kind of intact by paying them the money, that kind of thing. But I think the real answer is the lack of preseason games and the threshold of getting to 6 or 7 wins. Like matters to the boosters. And if you're at a place like Rice, if you can get, a win like that, like, because on paper, they could be 0-2 going into that game. You lose at Louisiana, you lose to Houston. Like it's a way to not be winless going into conference play is typically the answer, I think, to that. And some money laundering as well.
Are you for it or against it? Because I don't like how through the first 3 weeks of the season, it's like half the games are just like not even in the same league.
I'm for it. I wish it was done more universally. Like if these really are pseudo preseason games, why not make them have to be played in the first 2 weeks of the season? Like if you're playing an FCS opponent, you need to play them in August, right? Like in week 1, that's your preseason game. You get right, kind of work out the kinks against an opponent type of deal. Because I do think that FCS teams would maybe not fold, but they'd have a hard time affording what they're affording without some of those paychecks. We've seen a couple of them win and pull off the upsets against the FBS team. So I think they serve a purpose. I just hate when they're kind of sprinkled throughout the year. I wish they were just bunched up front where we could just have kind of a pseudo preseason week 1 and 2 and then get to the real stuff.
Yeah, I mean the SEC week 10 where everyone just plays a Southwest directional school is the worst.
Yeah. I mean, I get it if you're those teams, But yeah, for us, the average viewer, it's a waste of time.
All right, UTSA beats Incarnate Word 48-20. Craven, any thoughts on this one? UTSA gets in the win column, like you mentioned.
Yeah, got into the win column. It wasn't, like this weirdly close game. I think if you're a Roadrunner fan, you kind of worry what that Texas State loss does, and if they sleepwalk, and then all of a sudden it's the fourth quarter and it's like 14-10 or something. So they took care of business. That's good. Owen McCown looked better against worse competition, and so I think a theme throughout this show is we're going to learn a lot more about these programs in week 4 than we did in week 3. The Roadrunners are another one of those. A trip to Colorado State. I think will let us know kind of where the expectations should be for UTSA, because it's very easy right now to kind of jump off the train and feel like this is going to be a battle to a bowl eligibility deal. But if Texas State's just a really good football team, UTSA goes on the road and beats up on Colorado State, maybe it regalvanizes UTSA and what they can be in the American.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for week 3. Again, you mentioned it, Craven. I'm looking forward to next week. So many judgment games. By judgment, I mean we're going to kind of have a declaration of is this team for real or not.
Yeah, it's a huge week in the state of Texas, like you said, kind of a judgment week where we get to finally, I feel like, have huge, big opinions, like well thought out, solidified opinions.
Well, I've had those anyway through the first.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. They start to crystallize a little bit after week 4. 1, you've played a third of your games, and so that's a solid sample size. But we're seeing some of these teams against programs that can push them. Tech at Utah, North Texas at Army, SMU, TCU, Baylor hosts Arizona State. We just mentioned UTSA at Colorado State. So for about half the teams in the state of Texas, I think we have a clearer picture of who they are on September 21st than we do on September 14th.
Well, I can't wait for it, and we'll have you covered for that preview show coming up on Wednesday of this week. Thank you all for tuning in. For Mike Craven, senior writer, Dave Campbell's, I am Carter Yates, signing off for week 3.